Today, we're going to break down the playbook for some truly explosive growth. We're talking about the story of how one startup went from a pretty small operation to a seven-figure business, and they did it in just 1 year. So here's the big question, right? How on earth does a startup pull off 700% revenue growth in a single year? I mean, that sounds almost impossible, but it happened. And the answer is this incredible mix of smart strategy and some seriously bold experiments. You know, every great growth story, it always starts with a really audacious goal. And for this company, it all kicked off with what they called the seven-figure challenge. Okay, so let's set the scene. We're talking about a food tech startup in the Middle East. At the beginning of the year, their revenue was in the four-figure range. A solid start, for sure, but absolutely nowhere near where they wanted to be. They had their sights set on something way, way bigger. And this was the scale of that ambition, to jump from 4 figures all the way to 7 figures in annual revenue. A leap that massive, well, it doesn't just happen. It means you have to completely reinvent how you think about growth. Now, here's what's so important. Their first move wasn't just to throw a bunch of money at ads. Nope. They started by building what they called a growth blueprint. And you should think of this less like a simple marketing plan and more like a super deep data-backed analysis of everything, every customer touch point, every internal process, the whole brand experience. And what's really powerful here is just how deep they went with this research. Building this blueprint meant they had to dig in. They mixed all the digital analytics with actual conversations. I'm talking interviews with everyone from the founders to the customer support team. See, the goal wasn't just to know who their customers were. It was to know why they bought, when they bought, and what really truly made them tick. And all that digging into the data, it led them to a game-changing insight, one that would basically force them to rethink their entire strategy. It was time to find their winner and focus on it. So at first, their efforts were just diluted. They were all over the place. They had one single product that was driving half their sales, but their budget and their energy were spread super thin across everything else they offered. There was just no focus at all. But as they kept digging into those sales numbers and all that customer feedback, the data started telling a really, really clear story. One item in their lineup wasn't just doing well, it was a total breakout star. So that insight, it led to their first huge experiment. They asked, what if we focused almost all of our paid advertising on that one-star product? Well, the results were absolutely dramatic. That one product shot up from driving 50% of sales to an incredible 90%. This focus didn't just grow their revenue, it started to define their entire brand. And I love this because it's such a brilliant example of a core growth principle. The source material says it perfectly. Amazing things can happen with one experiment. And it's so true. This one focused test completely reshaped their business. Okay, so finding their star product was a huge win, for sure. But their most powerful insight, that was still to come. And it came from an experiment that was both incredibly bold and, honestly, completely counterintuitive. So after months of tracking their sales, they started to notice this really strange pattern. Every single month, sales would dip during the exact same period. And it didn't matter what promotions they ran. So this led them to a pretty radical question. What if the key to growth wasn't spending more, but actually stopping? This put them at a real crossroads. I mean, conventional wisdom says if your sales are slumping, you spend more to force them back up. But they decided to test the exact opposite. What if they turned their ads completely off during that predictable slow period? Now, this was a huge risk, especially with that seven-figure goal hanging over their heads. But the results were, in their own words, mind-blowing. First off, they got their highest ROAS, that's return on ad spend, ever. They were getting more money back for every dollar they spent than at any other time. But that was just the beginning. By taking the money they saved and reallocating it to the times when customers were actually buying, they didn't just get more efficient, they also smashed their record for the highest sales in a single month. And then, to top it all off, that very same month, they also had their single biggest sales day in the company's entire history. I mean, think about that for a second. One bold decision to stop spending money led to them shattering every single one of their previous records. It's wild. So, what happens when you combine a data-driven blueprint, a laser focus on your winning product, and the courage to run these bold experiments? What does that actually look like on the bottom line? Let's check out the final numbers. Over those 12 months, the company's total revenue grew by more than 700%. They didn't just hit their seven-figure goal, they completely blew past it. And you have to understand, this kind of growth creates a massive ripple effect. It's not just a number on a spreadsheet. Their team had to double in size. They had manual processes in the kitchen that had to be automated just to keep up with all the demand. This wasn't just marketing growth, it was a total business transformation. So, if we boil this all down, what is the seven-figure playbook we can take away from all this? Well, it seems to come down to four steps. 1. Build your strategy on hard data, not just assumptions. 2. Find your winning product and focus on it relentlessly. 3. Don't be afraid to run bold, even counterintuitive experiments. And 4. Remember that real growth is holistic. It changes the whole business. Ultimately, this whole story is just a powerful reminder that the biggest breakthroughs, they often come from challenging the way it's always been done. Which, it leaves us with one last question for you. What's the one bold experiment your business is just waiting to run?